The red and blue lights flashed in the rearview mirror like a warning from hell itself. Amara felt her stomach drop as she pulled over on the busy highway, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. Her husband Blake sat in the passenger seat, unusually quiet and tense. "Just a routine stop, baby," Blake said, but his voice cracked. "Probably just speeding." Officer Rodriguez approached the driver's side window with a serious expression. Amara rolled it down, offering her license and registration with a nervous smile. The officer was professional, asking basic questions about where they were headed. Everything seemed normal until he ran their licenses through his system. The wait felt like forever. When Officer Rodriguez returned, his face had changed completely. He looked troubled, almost shocked. Instead of handing back their documents, he leaned closer to the window. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you privately for a moment," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Can you please step out of the vehicle?" Amara's heart pounded. "Is something wrong? Please just step out. Your husband can stay in the car." Blake shifted uncomfortably. "Officer, what's this about? We weren't speeding that much." Officer Rodriguez ignored Blake completely. His focus was entirely on Amara. "Ma'am, please." With trembling legs, Amara got out of the car. Officer Rodriguez guided her several feet away from the vehicle, far enough that Blake couldn't hear their conversation. The highway traffic roared past them, but all Amara could focus on was the officer's serious face. "Ma'am, I ran your husband's license and there's something you need to know," Rodriguez said carefully. "According to our records, Blake Morrison is currently married to another woman. Has been for the past 8 years. The words hit Amara like a physical blow. The world seemed to tilt and she grabbed the officer's arm to steady herself. "What? That's impossible. We've been married for 5 years. I have the marriage certificate." "I'm sorry, but the legal records show he's married to a Stephanie Morrison in Phoenix, Arizona. Their marriage license was issued in 2015, 3 years before your ceremony." Amara felt like she was drowning. Every breath became difficult. "Are you sure? Could there be a mistake?" "I've triple-checked. I'm trained to notice these things because of identity theft cases. Blake Morrison, same social security number, same date of birth. He's legally married to another woman, which means..." Rodriguez paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your marriage isn't legal. He committed bigamy." The officer's words echoed in her mind. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of building a life together, 5 years of thinking she knew the man she loved. All of it built on lies. "Why are you telling me this?" Amara whispered. "Because I have a daughter your age. If this was happening to her, I'd want someone to tell her the truth." Rodriguez handed her a business card. "This is the number for victim services. You're going to need legal help." Amara looked back at the car where Blake sat waiting. He was checking his phone, looking impatient. How could she have been so blind? How many signs had she missed? "Ma'am, are you going to be okay to drive?" Officer Rodriguez asked. "I can call someone for you." "I'll be fine," Amara lied. She wasn't fine. She would never be fine again. But she needed to get home. She needed to confront Blake and demand the truth. "The traffic violation is the least of his problems," Rodriguez said quietly. "Bigamy is a felony. If you decide to press charges..." "I need time to think," Amara interrupted. Her mind was spinning with questions, with anger, with heartbreak. She walked back to the car on unsteady legs. Blake looked up as she approached, his face showing concern that now seemed fake. "Everything okay, baby?" What did he want? Amara got in the car without answering. She started the engine with mechanical movements, her mind blank with shock. Blake kept talking, asking questions, but his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "Amara, you're scaring me. What did the cops say?" She pulled back onto the highway, driving in complete silence. Blake's voice became more urgent, more worried, but she couldn't respond. Every word out of his mouth felt like another lie, another deception. When they reached their house, Amara parked and finally turned to look at her husband. The man she thought she knew. The stranger sitting next to her. "Who is Stephanie Morrison?" she asked quietly. Blake's face went white. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. In that moment, Amara knew with crushing certainty that everything Officer Rodriguez had told her was true. "Amara, I can explain." "Who is she, Blake?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. 5 years of lies, exposed in a single moment on a highway by a stranger who cared more about her well-being than her own husband did. Blake finally spoke, his voice barely audible. She's my wife." The words hung in the air like poison. Amara stared at Blake, waiting for him to take it back, to explain that it was all a misunderstanding. but his guilty expression told her everything she needed to know. Your wife, Amara repeated slowly. Your wife. Not your ex-wife. Your current wife. Blake rubbed his face with both hands. Amara, please let me explain. It's complicated. Complicated? Amara's voice rose. Being married to two women at the same time is complicated? I thought it was called bigamy. A crime. She got out of the car and walked toward their house. Their house. Was it even theirs? How many lies had built the foundation of their entire life together? Blake followed her, talking fast. Baby, please listen. Stephanie and I, we've been separated for years. We just never got divorced. The paperwork, the lawyers, it was expensive and… Stop. Amara turned around so suddenly that Blake almost ran into her. Stop calling me baby. Stop lying to me. You're legally married to another woman. That makes me what, exactly? Your mistress. No, you're my wife. In my heart, you're my real wife. In your heart. Amara laughed, but there was no humor in it. Blake, we had a wedding. I wore a white dress. My parents were there. My grandmother gave me her ring. She held up her hand, looking at the wedding ring that now felt like a weight. Was any of it real? Blake's face crumpled. Our love is real. Our marriage is real to me. But not to the law. Not to anyone else. Amara walked into the house, Blake trailing behind her. How long have you been married to her? The truth this time. 8 years, Blake admitted quietly. 8 years. Amara calculated quickly. So you were married to her when we met. You were married to her when you proposed to me. You were married to her when we had our wedding. Yes, but… Get out. Blake stopped following her. What? Get out of this house. Get out of my life. I can't even look at you right now. Amara, please. We can work through this. I'll get divorced. I'll make this right. She turned to face him, and Blake took a step back at the fury in her eyes. Make this right? Blake, you've been lying to me for 6 years. 6 years. Every morning when you woke up next to me, you knew you were committing a crime. Every time you called me your wife, you knew it was a lie. I wanted to tell you. When? When exactly were you planning to tell me? After 10 years? 20? Amara was pacing now, her anger building. What about children? We've been trying to have kids. Were you going to let me have babies that would be illegitimate because their father is a criminal? Blake flinched at the word criminal. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Bigamy is a felony in most states. You could go to prison. The reality of the situation was starting to sink in. Oh my God, what about our finances? Our credit? Our house? What do you mean? I mean, if we're not legally married, then legally I have no claim to anything we've built together. The house, the cars, the bank accounts. Amara felt sick. How much of our life together is in your name only? Blake looked uncomfortable. Most of it, but that doesn't mean. Most of it. Amara sat down heavily on the couch. So not only am I not your wife, but I have no legal protection at all. You could kick me out tomorrow and I'd have nothing. I would never do that. You've been lying to me for 6 years, Blake. I don't know what you're capable of anymore. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the clock on the mantel. The clock they had bought together for their 2nd anniversary. Another lie, another false milestone. Tell me about her, Amara said finally. About who? About Stephanie. Your real wife. Blake sat down across from her, but Amara held up a hand to stop him from getting too close. She lives in Phoenix. We got married young, right out of college. Things went wrong pretty quickly. But you never divorced her. The lawyers wanted too much money up front. And then I met you and everything was so perfect. I didn't want to ruin it by bringing up my past. So you decided to ruin it by committing bigamy instead. Blake had no answer for that. Does she know about me? Amara asked. No. So she thinks she's happily married to you while you're here playing house with me. Amara shook her head. That poor woman. She's as much a victim as I am. She's not a victim. We haven't been together in years. But she doesn't know that you married someone else. She doesn't know that you're a bigamist. Amara stood up. I want you out of this house tonight. Go to a hotel, go to a friend's place, I don't care. But I want you gone. Amara, please? No. I'm done listening to you. I'm done being lied to. I need time to think and I can't do that with you here. She walked toward the stairs. I'm going to pack some of your things. You can get the rest later when I'm not here. What are you going to do? Blake called after her. Amara paused on the stairs. I'm going to find out everything you've been hiding from me, and then I'm going to decide what to do about it. As she climbed the stairs, Blake called out one more time. I love you, Amara. That was never a lie. She didn't turn around. Love without honesty wasn't love at all. It was just another form of manipulation, and she was done being manipulated. Amara barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Blake's guilty face and heard Officer Rodriguez's words echoing in her mind. By morning, she had made a decision. She wasn't going to be a victim. She was going to find out exactly what Blake had been hiding. She called in sick to work and spent the morning researching private investigators online. She needed someone good, someone who could dig up information that she couldn't access herself. After reading dozens of reviews, she settled on Tony Castellanos, a former police detective who specialized in fraud cases. His office was in a small building downtown. Tony was a middle-aged Hispanic man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. When Amara explained her situation, he listened without judgment, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Bigamy cases are more common than you'd think, Tony said when she finished. And they're usually just the tip of the iceberg. If your husband was willing to lie about something that big, he's probably lying about other things too. What kind of other things? Money usually. Credit cards, loans, bank accounts. Men who commit bigamy often do it to support multiple lifestyles. It's expensive to maintain two households. Amara felt sick. So you think he's been stealing from me? I think we need to find out. Can you get me copies of all your financial records? Bank statements, credit reports, mortgage documents, everything. Yes, I can do that. Good. I'll also need some basic information about this Stephanie person. Full name, last known address, anything you can find. Tony leaned forward. Are you prepared for what we might discover? This could get ugly. It's already ugly, Amara said firmly. I need to know the truth. All of it. Over the next week, Tony worked his magic. He called Amara every few days with updates, and each call brought worse news. Your husband has been busy, Tony said during their first check-in. I found 3 credit cards in your name that you didn't apply for. Total debt of about $45,000. What? Amara dropped into a chair. How is that possible? Identity theft. He used your social security number and forged your signature. The cards are maxed out, and the bills are being sent to a P.O. box you didn't know about. Amara's hands shook as she wrote down the information. What else? He took out a $30,000 personal loan using your information as collateral. Again, forged signature. And there's a second mortgage on your house that you never signed for. A second mortgage? Amara felt like the room was spinning. How much? $80,000. The money was transferred to an account in Phoenix. Phoenix, where Stephanie lived. Blake had been stealing from Amara to support his other life. There's more, Tony continued. I managed to contact Stephanie Morrison. Nice lady, by the way. Turns out she had no idea Blake was married to someone else. You told her? I had to. She deserved to know. And here's the thing, he's been stealing from her too. Credit cards, loans, the whole 9 yards. She thought they were having financial problems because of bad luck. Turns out it was because her husband was supporting a double life. Amara couldn't speak. The scope of Blake's deception was overwhelming. Stephanie wants to talk to you, Tony said gently. She's just as angry and hurt as you are. She said she'd be willing to cooperate if you decide to press charges. Press charges? Amara, what Blake did to you is serious. Bigamy, identity theft, fraud, we're talking about multiple felonies. He could go to prison for years. Prison. Part of Amara was satisfied by the thought, but another part of her just felt empty. How had her life become this complicated? I need to think about it, she said. Of course. But don't think too long. There are statute of limitations issues, and the sooner we act, the better chance we have of recovering some of your money. After Tony hung up, Amara sat in her kitchen staring at the financial documents spread across the table. Nearly $200,000 in debt that she never agreed to. Her credit was ruined. Her marriage was fake. Her entire life had been built on lies. She picked up her phone and dialed the number Tony had given her. Hello. The voice was female, cautious. Is this Stephanie Morrison? Yes. Are you Amara? I am. Amara took a deep breath. I think we need to talk. The conversation lasted 2 hours. Stephanie was a teacher, quiet and trusting. She had met Blake in college and married him because she thought he was a good man. For 8 years she had believed they were happily married, even when money got tight and Blake started traveling more for work. He told me he was a sales manager, Stephanie said. Said he had to travel to different cities to meet clients. I never questioned it because I trusted him. He told me he was in consulting, Amara replied. Said he worked from home most of the time but had to travel occasionally for big projects. We've both been so stupid, Stephanie said bitterly. No, we've been trusting. There's a difference. By the end of the call, they had agreed to work together. Blake had victimized both of them, and they weren't going to let him get away with it. Amara called Tony back. I want to press charges. All of them. And I want to make sure he can never do this to anyone else. Good, Tony said. I was hoping you'd say that. I've already started putting together a case file. But Amara, you should know this is going to be a long process. And Blake isn't going to go quietly. I don't care. He destroyed my life. Now it's time for him to face the consequences. As Amara hung up the phone, she felt something she hadn't felt since the traffic stop. She felt powerful. Blake had taken everything from her, but he couldn't take her determination to see justice done. Tony's office became Amara's second home over the next few weeks. Together they built a case against Blake that was both comprehensive and damning. Every lie was documented, every forged signature photographed, every stolen dollar accounted for. Look at this, Tony said, spreading photos across his desk. These are copies of loan applications Blake filled out in your name. See the signature? It's close, but if you look carefully, the in Amara is different. He practiced, but he's not a professional forger. Amara studied the documents. Seeing her name on papers she had never signed felt surreal. How did he get away with this for so long? Most people don't check their credit reports regularly. And banks don't verify signatures as carefully as they should. Tony pulled out another file. But here's the interesting part. I found similar documents in Phoenix with Stephanie's forged signature. Same handwriting quirks, same techniques. He's done this before. Oh, it gets better. I ran a background check going back further and I found two other women. Rachel in Denver and Nicole in Atlanta. Blake was involved with both of them in long-term relationships, and both reported financial irregularities after they broke up. Amara felt sick. How many women has he done this to? At least 4 that we know of. Rachel lost $35,000, Nicole lost $50,000. Neither pressed charges because they couldn't prove it was identity theft rather than authorized use during their relationships. But we can prove it. Absolutely. Because Blake made one crucial mistake: he married you without divorcing Stephanie. That makes everything he did afterward clearly fraudulent. No judge is going to believe you authorized him to steal from you when you didn't even know he had another wife. Tony showed Amara copies of bank records from Phoenix. See these transfers? Blake was moving money from accounts in your name to accounts in Phoenix on a regular basis. Sometimes $2,000, sometimes $5,000. Always just under the reporting requirements. Smart, Amara said grudgingly. Smart but not smart enough. Electronic transfers leave paper trails. Tony smiled grimly. Blake isn't a criminal mastermind. He's just a con man who got greedy. They worked through the afternoon, organizing evidence and preparing witness statements. Stephanie had agreed to testify, as had Rachel and Nicole. The case against Blake was becoming airtight. There's something else, Tony said as they wrapped up. I've been monitoring Blake's activities. He knows we're investigating him. How do you know? He tried to access some of the accounts we've been tracking. When he couldn't, he started making phone calls. I have a contact at the phone company. Blake called a lawyer yesterday. Amara wasn't surprised. He's going to fight this. Of course he is. Men like Blake don't take responsibility for their actions. They blame everyone else. Tony gathered the files. But we're ready for him. The question is, are you ready? What do you mean? I mean, Blake is going to try to manipulate you. He's going to apologize, make promises, maybe even threaten you. Con men don't give up easily when their scams are exposed. As if on cue, Amara's phone buzzed with a text message from Blake. We need to talk. I can explain everything. She showed the message to Tony, who shook his head. Don't respond. Not yet. Let him sweat for a while. I want to see him, Amara said suddenly. I want to look him in the eye and tell him what I know. That's not a good idea. Not without protection. What kind of protection? Tony was quiet for a moment. The kind that involves you wearing a wire. The idea hit Amara like a lightning bolt. You want me to record him? I want him to confess on tape. If Blake thinks he can still manipulate you, he might admit to things he'd never admit in court. Tony leaned forward. It's risky. If he figures out what you're doing, he won't hurt me physically. Blake's not violent, just dishonest. Famous last words. But if you're determined to do this, I can set it up properly. The police would need to be involved. Amara thought about it. The idea of facing Blake terrified her, but it also felt necessary. She needed closure. She needed to hear him admit what he had done. "Set it up," she said. Tony made some phone calls while Amara sat in his office, staring out the window at the city below. Somewhere out there, Blake was probably planning his next move, figuring out how to talk his way out of the mess he had created. But Amara was planning too. And her plan didn't involve forgiveness or second chances. Her plan involved justice. "Okay," Tony said, hanging up the phone. "Detective Morrison, no relation to Stephanie, by the way, can meet us tomorrow morning. She works white-collar crimes and has experience with wire operations." "Wire operations? This is really happening." "It's happening. But Amara, once we start this process, there's no going back. Blake will know you've turned against him completely. Your marriage, fake as it was, will be over forever." Amara looked at her wedding ring, still sitting on her finger out of habit. She pulled it off and set it on Tony's desk. "It was over the moment he decided to lie to me," she said. "Now I'm just making it official." Detective Morrison was a sharp woman in her 40s with graying hair and intelligent eyes. She listened to Amara's story without interruption, occasionally making notes on a tablet. "This is a good case," she said when Amara finished. "Clear evidence, multiple victims, ongoing fraud. The DA will definitely want to prosecute." "Tony mentioned there were other women Blake victimized," Amara said. "Rachel and Nicole? We've contacted both of them. Rachel is flying in from Denver next week to give a statement. Nicole lives here in town now. She's agreed to testify." Detective Morrison pulled up files on her tablet. "What Blake did to these women follows the same pattern as what he did to you and Stephanie. Which is long-term relationships, promises of commitment, gradual financial entanglement, then systematic theft disguised as shared expenses." She showed Amara photos of documents. Rachel thought Blake was her business partner. He convinced her to take out loans to fund a restaurant they were going to open together. The restaurant never existed. And Nicole? Nicole thought they were buying a house together. Blake convinced her to liquidate her retirement account for the down payment. The house was real, but Blake bought it in his name only and kicked her out after 6 months. Amara felt sick. How does someone do this to multiple people and not feel guilty? "Sociopaths don't feel guilt the way normal people do," Detective Morrison explained. "They see other people as resources to be exploited." Blake probably justified it by telling himself that his victims could afford the losses. "Well, I can't afford it. None of us could. That's exactly why we're going to stop him." Detective Morrison closed her tablet. "Now, about the wire operation. Here's how it works." She explained the process in detail. Amara would wear a small recording device hidden in her clothing. The meeting with Blake would take place in a public location, with undercover officers nearby for safety. The goal was to get Blake to admit to as many crimes as possible. "The key is to stay calm and ask open-ended questions," Detective Morrison explained. "Don't accuse him directly, that will make him defensive. Instead, act like you're trying to understand how things got so complicated. Basically, let him think he can still manipulate me." "Exactly. Men like Blake are often eager to explain their actions because they think they're smarter than everyone else. If he believes you might forgive him, he'll probably tell you more than he should." They scheduled the meeting for the following Friday at a coffee shop downtown. Blake had been texting Amara constantly, begging for a chance to explain. She finally responded, agreeing to meet but setting strict conditions. Public place, 1 hour maximum, no promises about reconciliation. Blake's response was immediate. "Thank you, baby. I knew you'd give me a chance. I love you so much." Reading his text made Amara angry all over again. Even now, he was trying to manipulate her emotions. The next day, Tony arranged for Amara to meet Rachel and Nicole. They gathered at a small restaurant outside the city, away from any chance of running into Blake. Rachel was a tall redhead with laugh lines around her eyes, though she wasn't laughing when she told her story. "Blake and I were together for 2 years. I thought we were building a future together." "How did you meet him?" Amara asked. "Online dating. He said he was an entrepreneur looking for a business partner. We started dating, and after 6 months, he pitched me on this restaurant idea." Rachel stirred her coffee absently. "He had business plans, location scouting reports, everything. It all looked legitimate. But it wasn't. The restaurant was never supposed to exist. Blake took my $65,000 and disappeared. When I tried to track him down, I found out he'd given me a fake last name. Nicole was younger, maybe late 20s, with short black hair and a quiet voice. I was smarter than that, or so I thought. I made Blake provide documentation for everything. property deeds, mortgage pre-approval, the whole 9 yards. So what happened? The documents were real, but Blake had no intention of putting my name on the deed. After I gave him the down payment money, he found excuses to delay the paperwork. By the time I realized what was happening, he had already bought the house in his name only. Did either of you ever suspect he was married? Amara asked. Both women shook their heads. He was good at compartmentalization, Rachel said. When he was with me, I had his full attention. He made me feel like the most important person in his world. Same here, Nicole agreed. Looking back, I realize he probably scheduled his time with different women like business appointments. But at the time, it felt genuine. How long did it take you to get over it? Amara asked. Rachel and Nicole exchanged glances. You don't get over it, Rachel said finally. You learn to live with it. The financial loss was bad, but the betrayal was worse. He made me question my own judgment. I stopped dating completely for 2 years, Nicole added. I couldn't trust anyone. Their stories were heartbreaking but also empowering. These women had survived Blake's manipulation and rebuilt their lives. If they could do it, so could Amara. What made you decide to testify? Amara asked. When Detective Morrison called, I jumped at the chance, Rachel said. Blake needs to face consequences for what he's done. If we don't stop him, he'll just find more victims. I want him to go to prison, Nicole said simply. I want him to lose his freedom the same way he made us lose our security. As they talked, Amara realized something important. She wasn't alone in this. Blake had hurt multiple women, but those same women were now united against him. He had created his own downfall by being too greedy, by victimizing too many people. There's something I want to ask you both, Amara said as they prepared to leave. After Blake is convicted, I'm thinking about starting a support group for fraud victims. Would you be interested in helping? Absolutely, Rachel said immediately. Count me in, Nicole agreed. Driving home that evening, Amara felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. Blake had taken her money, her security, and her ability to trust. But he had also inadvertently connected her with other strong women who understood exactly what she was going through. Friday couldn't come soon enough. It was time to face Blake one last time, and this time she wouldn't be facing him as a victim. She would be facing him as someone who knew the truth and was ready to use it. Friday morning arrived with clear skies and unseasonably cool weather. Amara dressed carefully, choosing clothes that would hide the wire device Detective Morrison had fitted her with an hour earlier. The small recording device was taped to her back, with a thin wire running to a microphone position just below her collar. Remember, we'll be monitoring everything, Detective Morrison said as they did a final sound check. If you feel unsafe at any point, just say the phrase, I need some air, and we'll move in immediately. I understand. And don't try to be a hero. Get him talking, let him incriminate himself, then end the meeting. We have enough evidence to arrest him already. This recording is just insurance. Amara nodded, though her stomach was churning with nerves. She hadn't seen Blake since the night she kicked him out of the house. Part of her was curious to see how he would look, how he would act now that his lies had been exposed. The coffee shop was busy with the morning rush. Amara found a table near the window, positioned so that Detective Morrison and her partner could observe from a van parked across the street. She ordered a cup of tea and waited. Blake arrived 10 minutes late, looking tired and stressed. He had lost weight and his usually perfect hair was slightly messy. When he saw Amara, his face lit up with what looked like genuine relief. Baby, thank you for agreeing to see me, he said, sliding into the chair across from her. I've been going crazy these past few weeks. Don't call me baby, Amara said calmly. We're not married, remember? Blake flinched. Amara, please. I know you're angry, but we can work through this. Can we? Because I've been doing some research, Blake. I've learned some interesting things about you. What kind of research? Amara kept her voice level, remembering Detective Morrison's advice. I hired a private investigator. I know about the credit cards you opened in my name. I know about the loans. I know about the second mortgage on our house. Blake's face went pale. You hired a PI? I did. And I know about Stephanie, obviously. But I also know about Rachel and Nicole. The color drained completely from Blake's face. His hands started shaking slightly as he reached for his coffee cup. Rachel and Nicole, he repeated quietly. Your other victims. Though I suppose you don't think of them that way. Amara leaned forward slightly. Help me understand something, Blake. How does someone do what you did? How do you look someone in the eye and lie to them every single day for years? Blake was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was defensive. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. With Stephanie, things just went wrong. We were young, we rushed into marriage, and then we grew apart. So why didn't you get divorced? The lawyers wanted too much money up front. And then, I don't know. It was easier to just let it slide. Stephanie seemed happy believing we were still together, and I was living my own life. Your own life that included lying to other women. Blake shifted uncomfortably. When I met Rachel, I thought maybe I could start over. But I needed money to get established, and she had savings. So you stole from her. I borrowed from her. I always intended to pay her back. With what money? You didn't have a real job. Amara kept her voice curious rather than accusatory. What about Nicole? Nicole was different. She was smart, careful. I had to work harder to gain her trust. Blake seemed to be warming to his story as if explaining his techniques was somehow impressive. The house thing was actually kind of brilliant. I found a property that needed work, convinced her we could flip it together, then put it in my name for tax purposes. And then you kicked her out. The relationship wasn't working. I tried to make it work, but Nicole was too controlling. She wanted to manage everything. Amara felt sick listening to him. Even now, Blake was trying to justify his actions, making himself the victim in each story. What about me? She asked. Was I too controlling too? No, baby Amara. You were perfect. You are perfect. Blake reached across the table as if to take her hand, but she pulled back. What we have is real. The other women, they were mistakes. You're the one I really love. But you were married to Stephanie the entire time. That was just paperwork. Legal stuff. My real marriage is with you. Except it's not legal. Which means it's not real. Amara paused. Blake, do you understand what you've done? The credit cards, the loans, the forged signatures, that's identity theft. That's fraud. Those are felonies. I was going to pay it all back. The credit cards, everything. I just needed time to get back on my feet. Back on your feet from what? You never had a real job. You were living off money stolen from multiple women. Blake's expression changed, becoming more desperate. Amara, please. I know I made mistakes, but I can fix this. I can get divorced from Stephanie. I can pay back the money. We can start fresh. With what? You don't have any money. You've been stealing from me for years. I'll get a job. A real job. I'll do whatever it takes. Blake leaned forward urgently. I love you, Amara. I've never loved anyone the way I love you. The stuff with Rachel and Nicole, that was before I met you. That was different. Was it? Because you were stealing from me while you were with Nicole. Blake paused, realizing he had been caught in another lie. The timeline got complicated. The timeline got complicated because you were running multiple scams at the same time. Amara felt her anger rising, but she forced herself to stay calm. Blake, I need you to be honest with me about something. Are there other women? Besides Stephanie, Rachel, Nicole, and me? No, Blake said quickly. Just you four. Just us four. Amara shook her head. Listen to yourself. You say you love me, but you talk about me like I'm one item on a list. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. You're a con man, Blake. You find vulnerable women, gain their trust, steal their money, and then move on. The only difference with me is that you got careless and married me without divorcing your first wife. Blake was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was smaller. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. But we did get hurt. All of us. Rachel lost her life savings. Nicole lost her retirement fund. Stephanie thinks she's married to a man who loves her, but you've been cheating on her for years. And me? Amara paused. You stole my ability to trust anyone. I can earn it back. No, you can't. Amara stood up. Blake, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I know everything. I have documentation of every crime you committed. I have statements from all your victims. The police are building a case against you. Blake's face went white. The police? Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? You committed felonies, Blake. Multiple felonies against multiple people. Amara, please. If you go to the police, I'll go to prison. Yes, you will. But what about us? What about our life together? Amara looked at him with something approaching pity. There never was a news, Blake. There was you lying to me every day for 5 years. That's not a relationship. That's a crime. She walked away from the table, leaving Blake sitting alone with his coffee and his lies. As she pushed through the coffee shop door, she heard him call her name, but she didn't turn around. In the van across the street, Detective Morrison was smiling. We got everything we need. Blake just confessed to identity theft, fraud, and bigamy on tape. Nice work. Amara sat down heavily, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. Is it over? The hard part is over. Now we arrest him and let the courts handle the rest. Through the window, Amara could see Blake still sitting at the table, his head in his hands. She felt no sympathy for him. He had made his choices and now he would face the consequences. When will you arrest him? She asked. Right now, Detective Morrison said, speaking into her radio. All units move in. Blake's arrest made the local news. Local man charged with bigamy and fraud, read the headline, accompanied by his mug shot and a brief description of the charges. Amara found herself both satisfied and oddly hollow watching the coverage. The arrest itself had been anticlimactic. Blake didn't resist or make a scene. He simply stood up when the officers approached and allowed himself to be handcuffed. The last thing Amara heard him say was, "Can I call my lawyer?" Now, 6 weeks later, Amara sat in the prosecutor's office with Assistant District Attorney Linda Chin, reviewing the evidence that would be presented at trial. We have an exceptionally strong case, Linda said, flipping through files. The recorded confession alone is enough to convict, but we also have financial records, forged documents, and testimony from multiple victims. How long do you think he'll get? Amara asked. If he's convicted on all charges? Probably 8 to 12 years. Bigamy carries a 5-year maximum, but the identity theft and fraud charges are more serious. Linda pulled out a calendar. The trial is scheduled to start in 6 weeks. Are you prepared to testify? I think so. It won't be easy. Blake's lawyer is going to try to paint him as a man who made mistakes because he was in love. He'll argue that Blake never intended to hurt anyone. But he did hurt people. Multiple people. I know that and you know that, but juries can be sympathetic to defendants who seem remorseful. Linda leaned forward. Blake's lawyer has already approached me about a plea deal. He wants Blake to plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for a shorter sentence. What kind of plea deal? 3 years in prison, 5 years probation, and full restitution to all victims. Amara thought about it. 3 years seemed light for what Blake had done, but it would guarantee he went to prison and that she might get some of her money back. What do you think? She asked. I think we can do better at trial. But the decision is partly yours. If you and the other victims prefer the certainty of a plea deal. Let me talk to the others. Amara had stayed in touch with Stephanie, Rachel, and Nicole throughout the legal process. They had formed an unlikely support group, connected by their shared experience of Blake's manipulation. She called Stephanie first. Blake's legal wife had filed for divorce immediately after his arrest and was in the process of disentangling their finances. 3 years doesn't seem like enough, Stephanie said when Amara explained the plea offer. He ruined my credit, stole my savings, and lied to me for 8 years. 3 years is nothing. Rachel agreed. I want him to face the maximum penalty. Maybe that will make other con men think twice. Nicole was more practical. What are the chances we actually get our money back if he goes to prison for longer? Probably not good, Amara admitted. But this isn't just about money anymore. It's about justice. Then let's go to trial, Nicole said. I want to look him in the eye and tell the jury what he did to me. Amara called Linda back. We want to go to trial. I was hoping you'd say that. We'll make Blake face the consequences of what he did. The next few weeks were intensive preparation. Linda walked each victim through their testimony, helping them focus on facts rather than emotions. She explained how Blake's defense lawyer would try to discredit them and coach them on how to respond. Remember, you're not on trial here, Linda told them during a group session. Blake is. You don't have to justify your decisions or explain why you trusted him. Normal people trust others until given a reason not to. Blake exploited that trust. Amara also spent time with a victim's advocate named Jennifer, who helped her process the emotional aspects of the case. Testifying can be re-traumatizing, Jennifer explained. You'll have to relive the betrayal in front of strangers. Blake's lawyer might try to make you feel stupid for trusting him. I'm not stupid, Amara said firmly. Of course you're not. But con men are professionals. They study human psychology and exploit our natural inclination to trust. Blake wasn't some random criminal who got lucky. He was skilled at what he did. As the trial date approached, Amara found herself thinking about the future. Regardless of what happened in court, Blake would eventually be out of prison. She needed to build a life that didn't depend on his punishment for her happiness. She had started seeing a therapist to work through trust issues. She had also begun researching nonprofits that helped fraud victims, thinking about Jennifer's earlier suggestion about starting a support group. What would you call it? Jennifer asked during one of their sessions. I'm not sure yet. Something that conveys strength rather than victimhood. Amara thought for a moment. Maybe Phoenix Foundation. Like rising from the ashes. I like it. And I know some people who could help you get started. The night before the trial began, Amara sat in her living room, the house she now owned entirely, since Blake's name had been removed from all the legal documents. She looked at the photos on the mantle, pictures of her family and friends, but none of Blake. She had removed every trace of him from her life. Her phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie. Ready for tomorrow? As ready as I'll ever be, Amara replied. Whatever happens, we've already won, Stephanie wrote back. We survived him. We're stronger now. Stephanie was right. Blake had intended to destroy them financially and emotionally. Instead, he had connected them with other strong women and given them a purpose. Tomorrow they would tell their stories and let justice take its course. But regardless of the verdict, Amara had already reclaimed her life. Blake's punishment would be satisfying, but her healing didn't depend on it. She was no longer a victim waiting for justice. She was a survivor ready to help others do the same. The courtroom was packed on the first day of Blake's trial. Amara arrived early and was surprised to see how many people were there. Some were reporters, but others seemed to be friends and family members of the victims. Blake sat at the defendant's table in a gray suit, looking smaller and more ordinary than Amara remembered. His lawyer, James Patterson, was an expensive-looking man in his 50s who kept whispering to his client. All rise, the bailiff called as Judge Martinez entered. She was a stern-looking woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. Amara had researched her background and learned that Judge Martinez had a reputation for being tough on white-collar criminals. The opening statements painted two very different pictures of Blake Morrison. Prosecutor Linda Chin described him as a calculating predator who systematically targeted vulnerable women for financial gain. Blake Morrison is not a man who made mistakes because of love, Chin told the jury. He is a career criminal who used romance as a weapon. Over the course of 8 years, he defrauded 4 different women out of more than $300,000. He forged signatures, opened fraudulent accounts, and committed bigamy to hide his crimes. Defense attorney Patterson presented Blake as a flawed man who got in over his head trying to make his relationships work. Blake Morrison never intended to hurt anyone, Patterson argued. He made poor financial decisions while trying to support the women he cared about. These were not calculated crimes but desperate attempts to keep his relationships together. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Chin presented financial records showing the systematic theft, handwriting experts who testified about forged signatures, and documentation proving Blake's bigamous marriage. When Stephanie took the stand, she spoke clearly and calmly about discovering her husband's double life. I trusted him completely, she said. When money got tight, I believed Blake when he said it was due to economic problems. I never imagined he was stealing from me to support another family. Patterson tried to suggest that Stephanie should have known about Blake's financial irregularities, but she handled his cross-examination well. I trusted my husband, she repeated. I shouldn't have to investigate the man I married to make sure he isn't committing crimes. Rachel's testimony was emotional but powerful. She explained how Blake had convinced her to invest her life savings in a non-existent restaurant. He had business plans, permits, everything looked legitimate, she said, wiping away tears. I gave him $65,000 because I believed we were building a future together. Patterson's cross-examination was more aggressive with Rachel. He suggested she was a naive businesswoman who should have done more due diligence. So you're saying it's my fault that I trusted him? Rachel shot back. I'm not the one who created fake business documents and forged signatures. Nicole was the most composed witness. She calmly described how Blake had convinced her to liquidate her retirement account for a house down payment, then bought the house in his name only. I have all the documentation, she said, presenting receipts and bank records. I can prove every dollar I gave him and show that my name never appeared on any property documents. When Patterson suggested that Nicole should have protected herself legally, she was ready with a response. I did protect myself. I kept records of everything. That's how we can prove Blake committed fraud. Finally, it was Amara's turn to testify. She had been dreading this moment, but when she sat in the witness box and looked at the jury, she felt calm and determined. Linda Chin walked her through the timeline of her relationship with Blake, focusing on the financial crimes. Did you ever authorize Blake to open credit cards in your name? Chin asked. Never. Did you ever sign loan documents for $30,000? No, I did not. Did you know that Blake was legally married to another woman when he married you? I had no idea. If I had known, I never would have married him. Patterson's cross-examination was predictably aggressive. He tried to suggest that Amara had known about Blake's financial problems and had authorized him to use her credit. Isn't it true that you and Blake shared financial responsibilities? We shared some expenses like groceries and utilities. I never authorized him to forge my signature on loan documents. But you lived together as husband and wife. Didn't you consider his debts to be your debts? I considered the debts we agreed to take on together to be our debts. I never agreed to have my identity stolen. Patterson tried several different angles, but Amara remained calm and factual. She had prepared for this moment for months, and she wasn't going to be intimidated. The most damaging evidence was the recording from the coffee shop. The jury listened in silence as Blake's voice filled the courtroom, confessing to fraud and explaining his techniques for manipulating women. When the recording ended, several jury members were shaking their heads in disgust. Blake's defense was weak. Patterson called a few character witnesses who testified that Blake was generally a good person who had made mistakes. He also put Blake on the stand, which turned out to be a disaster. Blake tried to present himself as a victim of circumstances, but Chen's cross-examination exposed him as manipulative and unrepentant. Do you take responsibility for forging Amara's signature on loan documents? Chen asked. I take responsibility for making poor decisions, but I was trying to help our relationship. That's not what I asked. Do you take responsibility for forging her signature? Yes or no? Blake stammered. The situation was complicated. Yes or no, Mr. Morrison? Yes, but... Thank you. Do you take responsibility for marrying Amara while you were still legally married to Stephanie Morrison? Technically yes, but... Yes or no? Yes. Chin methodically got Blake to admit to each crime while he tried to justify his actions. By the end of his testimony, he looked petty and self-serving. The closing arguments summarized the case clearly. Chin reminded the jury that Blake had admitted to his crimes on tape and that multiple witnesses had provided consistent testimony about his pattern of behavior. Patterson made a final plea for leniency, arguing that Blake's crimes were motivated by love rather than greed. But his argument rang hollow after weeks of evidence showing Blake's calculated deception. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood to read the verdict. On the charge of bigamy, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of identity theft in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of fraud in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. The guilty verdicts continued for all charges. Blake sat motionless as his fate was sealed. In the gallery, Amara felt a wave of relief wash over her. 6 weeks later, Blake returned to court for sentencing. Judge Martinez had clearly reviewed the case thoroughly. Mr. Morrison, you have committed serious crimes against multiple victims over many years, she said sternly. Your actions show a pattern of calculated deception that has caused significant financial and emotional harm. She sentenced Blake to 10 years in prison followed by 5 years of probation. He would also be required to pay full restitution to all victims, though Amara wasn't optimistic about actually recovering her money. As Blake was led away in handcuffs, Amara felt a strange sense of closure. Justice had been served. Blake would spend the next decade in prison thinking about the consequences of his choices. Outside the courthouse, the 4 women hugged each other. They had survived Blake's manipulation and seen him held accountable for his crimes. What happens now? Stephanie asked. Now we rebuild, Amara said. And we make sure other women don't go through what we did. It was time to start the next chapter of her life. 2 months after Blake's sentencing, Amara officially filed paperwork to establish the Phoenix Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping fraud victims rebuild their lives. The irony wasn't lost on her that Blake's crimes had given her a purpose she never would have found otherwise. The foundation started small, operating out of Amara's living room with help from Stephanie, Rachel, and Nicole. They created a website, established a hotline, and began reaching out to other victims of romance fraud. We got 3 new calls this week, Rachel reported during their monthly meeting. She had moved to town to help run the foundation full-time. 2 women who were scammed by men they met online, and one whose boyfriend stole her identity. What kind of help do they need? Amara asked. Legal advice mostly. And emotional support. One of them is too embarrassed to tell her family what happened. Amara understood that feeling completely. The shame of being deceived was often worse than the financial loss. That's why the Phoenix Foundation focused as much on emotional recovery as practical assistance. I think we should start a support group, Nicole suggested. Face-to-face meetings where people can share their stories without judgment. Good idea. Jennifer from Victim Services said she'd help facilitate if we need her. The foundation grew quickly. Amara was amazed by how many people reached out for help. Romance fraud was apparently much more common than she had realized, but victims rarely reported it because of embarrassment and shame. 6 months after Blake's conviction, Amara was invited to speak at a conference for financial crimes investigators. Standing in front of 200 law enforcement professionals, she told her story and explained how they could better support fraud victims. The financial crime is just the beginning, she explained. Victims also suffer emotional trauma that can last for years. They lose their ability to trust, their sense of security, their confidence in their own judgment. Recovery requires both practical and emotional support. After her speech, a man in his 40s approached her. He was tall with graying hair and kind eyes, wearing a well-tailored suit. "Ms. Johnson? I'm James Rodriguez. I'm an attorney who specializes in helping fraud victims recover damages. I wanted to tell you how impressed I am with your work." "Thank you. Are you related to Officer Rodriguez by any chance?" James smiled. "He's my uncle. He told me about your case when it first happened. I've been following your foundation's work ever since." They talked for nearly an hour about victim advocacy and legal remedies. James was knowledgeable and passionate about helping people who had been taken advantage of. When he asked if he could take her to dinner to continue the conversation, Amara surprised herself by saying yes. "I should warn you," she said as they walked to the restaurant, "I have serious trust issues when it comes to men. That's understandable given what you've been through. I'm not in any hurry." Dinner was comfortable and easy. James talked about his work helping fraud victims recover assets, and Amara shared stories about the Phoenix Foundation. He was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that made her laugh. When he walked her to her car, James didn't try to kiss her or push for another date. Instead, he handed her his business card. "If you ever need legal help for the foundation, please call me. I'd be happy to volunteer my services." "I'll keep that in mind. And if you'd like to have dinner again sometime, I'd like that too. But no pressure." Driving home, Amara realized she was smiling. For the first time in years, she had spent an evening with a man without thinking about Blake or wondering what was being hidden from her. James seemed genuine, but more importantly, she was beginning to trust her own judgment again. Over the following months, Amara and James developed a friendship. He helped the Phoenix Foundation with legal issues and occasionally joined Amara for dinner or coffee. Their relationship progressed slowly, built on honest conversation and shared values. "I appreciate that you're not trying to rush me into anything," Amara told him one evening. "Trust has to be earned," James replied. "I've seen what happens when that trust is betrayed. I'd rather take things slowly and build something real." A year after Blake's conviction, the Phoenix Foundation was helping dozens of fraud victims each month. They had expanded to include financial counseling, legal referrals, and support groups. Amara had quit her old job to run the foundation full-time. The work was challenging but rewarding. Every person they helped validated Amara's belief that Blake's crimes had inadvertently created something positive. One afternoon, Amara received a letter forwarded through the prison system. It was from Blake. "Dear Amara," it read, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry for what I did. I've had a lot of time to think in here and I realize how much I hurt you and the other women. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I take full responsibility for my actions. I hope you're doing well. Blake." Amara read the letter twice, then threw it away. Blake's apology didn't change what he had done, and she didn't need it for her own healing. She had moved past being defined by his crimes. That evening, James came over for dinner. As they cooked together in her kitchen, Amara felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. "Blake wrote me a letter," she mentioned casually. "How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, I don't feel much of anything. It's like he's a stranger now." Amara stirred the pasta sauce. "I used to be so angry at him, but even that's gone. He's just irrelevant to my life now." James smiled. "That sounds like progress." "It is. I'm not the same person who was married to Blake. I'm stronger, more independent, more careful about who I trust. But I'm also more compassionate toward other people who've been hurt. The Phoenix Foundation is proof of that." After dinner, they sat on Amara's porch watching the sunset. James reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. "Amara, there's something I want to talk to you about," he said. Her stomach tightened automatically, a leftover response from her time with Blake. But when she looked at James's face, she saw only honesty and affection. "What is it?" "I love you," he said simply. I know we've been taking things slowly and I don't want to rush you. But I needed you to know how I feel. Amara felt tears in her eyes, but they were happy tears. I love you too, James. I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to say that to someone again. You never have to doubt me, he said. I'll never lie to you or hide anything from you. You have my word on that. I believe you, Amara said and realized she actually did. For the first time since that terrible day on the highway, Amara felt truly hopeful about the future. Blake had tried to destroy her, but she had not only survived, she had thrived. And now she was ready to build something new with someone who deserved her trust. 2 years later, Amara stood in the bridal suite of a small church, adjusting her wedding dress in the mirror. This time she wore ivory instead of white, a subtle acknowledgement that this wasn't her first wedding, even if it was her first real marriage. You look beautiful, Stephanie said, fastening the clasp on Amara's necklace. She had flown in from Phoenix to be Amara's maid of honor, cementing a friendship that had been forged in shared trauma but had grown into genuine affection. I can't believe I'm nervous, Amara admitted. James and I have been together for 2 years. We've talked about everything, planned everything. There are no surprises this time. That's exactly why you should be nervous, Rachel laughed, adjusting her bridesmaid dress. This is the real thing. Nicole peeked out the window at the small gathering of guests. James looks nervous too. In a good way. The Phoenix Foundation had grown beyond Amara's wildest expectations. They now had offices in 3 cities and had helped over 500 fraud victims recover both financially and emotionally. Amara still ran the organization, but she had hired professional staff and no longer worked 18-hour days. The foundation's success had brought unexpected opportunities. Amara had testified before Congress about romance fraud, consulted with law enforcement agencies, and written a book about her experience. But the most rewarding part was still the individual stories, people who had been victimized and then found the strength to rebuild. Mrs. Rodriguez to be, it's time, Jennifer announced from the doorway. She had become not just a colleague but one of Amara's closest friends. Walking down the aisle, Amara saw the faces of people who had supported her journey. Her parents, who had stood by her through the darkest period of her life. Her sister, who had offered to handle Blake when she first learned about his crimes. Colleagues from the Phoenix Foundation. And survivors they had helped, people who had found their own strength and were now paying it forward. James waited at the altar in a navy suit, his eyes bright with happiness. Officer Rodriguez, his uncle, stood beside him as best man. The man whose honesty had started Amara's journey toward justice would witness her journey toward joy. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When it came time for vows, James spoke first. Amara, you've taught me that love isn't just about happiness, it's about trust, honesty, and showing up for each other every day. You've survived betrayal and built something beautiful from the ashes. I promise to be worthy of your trust, to tell you the truth even when it's difficult, and to support your dreams as fiercely as you've supported mine. Amara's vows were equally personal. James, you showed me that it was possible to love again without losing myself. You've been patient with my fears, supportive of my mission, and honest in all things. I promise to build our future together on a foundation of truth, trust, and genuine partnership. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the small church erupted in applause. As James kissed her, Amara felt a completeness she had never experienced before, not even in the early days with Blake. At the reception, Amara's father gave a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. 5 years ago, we watched Amara go through something that would have broken many people. Instead, she used that experience to help others and to build something meaningful. Today we celebrate not just her marriage to James, but her triumph over adversity. To Amara and James, may your love be a beacon of hope for others. Later in the evening, Amara stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The night was clear and cool, with stars visible despite the city lights. Getting some air? James asked, joining her on the garden patio. Just thinking about how different my life is now compared to 5 years ago. Any regrets? Amara considered the question seriously. About Blake? No. If I hadn't gone through that experience, I never would have started the foundation. I never would have met you. I'd probably still be living a comfortable but unremarkable life, never knowing how strong I could be. So you're grateful for what Blake did to you? I'm grateful for what I did with what Blake did to me. There's a difference. Amara leaned against her new husband. He tried to destroy me, but instead he gave me a purpose. That's not his victory, it's mine. Through the window they could see their guests dancing and celebrating. Stephanie was laughing at something Rachel had said. Nicole was deep in conversation with one of James's law partners. Jennifer was dancing with Officer Rodriguez. Look at all the people who are here because of what happened, Amara mused. Blake connected us all, just not in the way he intended. Evil sometimes creates unexpected good, James agreed. But that's because good people refuse to let evil have the last word. The next morning, as they prepared to leave for their honeymoon, Amara received a call from the Phoenix Foundation's office manager. I'm sorry to bother you on your wedding day, Lisa said, but we got a call from a woman in Texas. Her boyfriend stole $50,000 and disappeared. She's desperate for help and doesn't know what to do. Transfer her to the crisis line. Make sure she gets connected with someone today. Already done. I just wanted you to know she said she found us through your book. She said reading your story gave her hope that she could survive this. After hanging up, Amara smiled. Even on her wedding day, the work continued. Another person who had been victimized was taking the first step toward recovery, just as Amara had done 5 years earlier. Blake was still in prison and would be for several more years. Occasionally, Amara heard updates through the legal system, but she no longer thought about him regularly. He had become a footnote in her story rather than the defining chapter. As they drove to the airport, James reached over and squeezed Amara's hand. No regrets about not taking him back? He teased gently. Amara laughed. Are you kidding? That man destroyed my credit, stole my identity, committed bigamy, and lied to me every day for 5 years. The only thing I regret is not finding out sooner. What if he gets out of prison and tries to contact you? Then I'll ignore him just like I ignored his letter. Blake is my past. You're my future. She looked at her wedding ring, a simple band that meant more to her than any expensive jewelry Blake had ever given her with stolen money. Besides, I'm not the same person who married him. That woman was naive and trusting. This woman knows her worth and won't settle for anything less than complete honesty. Good, James said. Because you deserve nothing but the best. 5 years after that terrible traffic stop, Amara had everything Blake had tried to take away from her. Financial security, genuine love, and most importantly, the ability to trust again. But she also had things he never could have given her. Purpose, strength, and the knowledge that she could survive anything. The Phoenix Foundation would continue helping fraud victims long after Blake was released from prison. Every person they helped was a victory over the kind of predator Blake represented. Every survivor who rebuilt their life was proof that criminals like Blake couldn't win in the end. As their plane took off, Amara looked down at the city below and smiled. Somewhere down there, Blake was sitting in a prison cell paying for his crimes. And somewhere else, another fraud victim was picking up the phone to call the Phoenix Foundation, taking the first step toward reclaiming their life. The cop who had pulled her aside that day had given Amara devastating news that shattered her world. But from those ashes, she had built something beautiful, something meaningful, something that would help others for years to come. Blake had hidden something horrifying, just as Officer Rodriguez had warned. But Amara had turned that horror into hope, and that was the greatest revenge of all.